California has been battered by a series of atmospheric rivers, and they're bracing for another one this evening. Meanwhile, in the Great Lakes region, digging out from a snowstorm, you can see all that snow on the ground there. And in the south, some rather nice weather for this time of year. Let's take a look at the surface map. And there we go. There's the surface chart early this afternoon. We always start with this graphic because this shows where all the air masses are, where all the fronts are, and of course the precipitation. And we do have some new viewers. For those of you who are not familiar with this weathercast, this is done out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but we cover all areas of North America and sometimes go over to Europe and Asia. But a lot of our focus this afternoon will, of course, be on the West Coast. So let us start. This is the frontal system that battered California a couple of days ago, a dry sector. This is very much a spring-like type pattern. You can see those dew points in the 20s, and out ahead of it, moisture coming northward with dew points in the 60s. And those dew points are in the lower left-hand corner of the plot, and that corresponds to how rich the air is. If we could get storms forming along that dry line and the warm front, they would certainly take advantage of that moisture, but we're clearly lacking some ingredients. We'll try to take a look at that in a little bit. Let's head out to the West Coast. There's our next system. We're pulling that southerly flow northward. That's going to be the warm air advection, already producing some showers around the foothills of Northern California. In the northern plains, we've got a cold polar high, temperatures in the single digits in North Dakota with extensive fog and some blowing snow. The snow to liquid ratio at Minneapolis this morning was 50-1, which is very, very dry snow. And across the Dakotas, it's down as low as 15-1. Let's head up into Canada real quick. The old occlusion off the coast of Vancouver Island, kind of tracking northward, and some rain with that onshore flow into southeastern Alaska. Up in Alaska, not very much going on, the typical cold air in the valleys, and we've dropped off to minus 21 at Fort Yukon. In northern Canada, well, cold as usual. If you like the cold, that's a good place to go. Coldest temperature that I'm seeing is in Pelly Bay, minus 38 up there. That's along the distant early warning sight line, kind of a historical military Cold War relic. A lot of the stations were built up right in this area, and that is one of them. Heading down into Canada, not very much going on there either. A little bit of snow around this polar high, and an outgoing polar system in Quebec, and as soon as that clears on out, there's going to be some very nice weather around Montreal this weekend. Some rare clearing. They're going to see some sunshine in that region. Some residual northeasterly flow through the northeastern U.S., offshore flow into the Atlantic, and a little bit of snow up there in Maine, but they've had quite a bit of warm weather the past couple of days, and a lot of the rivers are running near record daily flow levels in the Portland, Maine area. And quite a bit of rain along the East Coast over the past few days, and down there in Georgia, they've had up to about 6 inches in some areas, and most of the state got about 1 to 2 inches. But heading back into California, this graphic just came out from the Weather Service office in Sacramento just in the past hour, and this shows how much precip they've gotten over the past 2 work weeks, so going back to last Monday. The lowest amounts in the central San Joaquin Valley starting out about 1 to 1.5 inches, and as you go towards the Sierra Nevadas, up to 15 inches with that orographic lift. A lot of rain as well in the coastal range, widespread 10 to 15 inch amounts, and even down there in the San Gabriel Mountains around Los Angeles, lots of 10 to 15 amounts as well. And this was pretty impressive. Also, the total snowfall, widespread 50 to 100 inches over the past 2 weeks. And that's gone as high as 119 inches at Mammoth Mountain and Donner Pass. Yeah, kind of a checkered history there. 70 inches. And this is probably a season similar to what they had back there I guess that was the 1840s or 1850s. And here's some of the rainfall amounts around Los Angeles, Bakersfield, San Luis Obispo over the past 2 days. And starting out in the northern areas, well, pretty dry in the valleys as we would expect, about ½ inch up to 1 inch. But as we go south towards Los Angeles, 1 to 2 inch amounts, and up there around Burbank, up into the valleys northwest of Los Angeles, up to about 2 to 3 inches, and some isolated 4 to 5 inch amounts. Let's take a look at the southwest deserts and work our way up the coast. A beautiful day in the southwestern U.S., plenty of clearing and subsidence back behind that system that came across the Great Basin. But up to the north, man, there's a lot of snow on the ground there, even in the valleys. And that's pretty close to where I worked. I spent 3 years at the Tonopah Test Range when I was in the Air Force. That's where they initially flew the F-117 stealth fighter. That was quite an interesting experience, and I'll probably discuss that a little bit one of these days. Around Las Vegas, looks pretty clear there as well, but plenty of snow in the Mount Charleston area. The desert's looking pretty clear, but man, look at the Sierra Nevadas, white with snow. Heading up to Northern California, I decided to just put the interstates on there instead of the counties. Looks a little bit more legible. But we've got these initial cirrus bands coming inland, and that progresses into altostratus, altocumulus, and the main frontal system with the nimbostratus, cumulonimbus, and so on is still way out there. But on the backside, some actual clearing. That may be kind of deceptive, though, because, you have to kind of work your way down the frontal boundary and see what's down on the tail end. So we zoom out, and yeah, it does look a little bit stormy on that tail end. We'll take a look at the models and see what that's going to do. Further to the north, we've got the occlusion and a little bit of a frontal system, kind of like that. That trails off into an occlusion to the north. You can see the cold air advection cumulus, that's open cell cumulus, typically associated with convection, with cold conditions in the mid and upper levels. And we've got the wraparound cold conveyor belt right there, and the warm conveyor belt working north and feeding some of these deeper convective cells. Let's go to Oregon. And yeah, that's definitely a line of convection just offshore as we record this, and probably by the time this video is posted, that should be coming up on the coast. This is an interesting chart I thought you might enjoy. This goes back to Wednesday. So you're looking at Wednesday evening with that big, scary storm system off California. We were looking at potential vorticity, actually the height of the 2 PVU surface, so that's going to be close to the tropopause. And this is kind of a complicated chart. I'm going to have to explain this some other time, but the purple indicates where the tropopause is unusually low, and that's typically where you have subsidence in the wake of the system. And usually the warm advection region is going to be found out ahead of it, where we've got these higher values, which are up near 150 millibars. So the important thing is it looks like kind of a cool chart here, and you kind of watch the system move inland, and this represents some of the strong dynamics associated with it. So we're up to yesterday around lunchtime, and then overnight this energy moves into the Rockies, produces some heavy snow in Utah and Colorado. And we find that out in the plains this afternoon, with the dynamics somewhat weaker. And some of that is due to the dry air mass. We're kind of lacking some of the latent heat that's required, but that's going to continue moving eastward. There it is over Kansas this evening, and that'll continue funneling into the Ohio River Valley, and that'll be a factor out there during the weekend. And that nice weather we talked about in Montreal, well, if we back this up to Saturday, you can see some of the strong subsidence back here, the purple and blue colors indicating that, and that helps to clear out the air mass. And then out to the west, there comes our next little bits of energy, a big one coming on shore for early Sunday, and another chunk of energy heading into much of California for Tuesday. And the fun keeps on coming. Okay, let's take a quick look at the upper air chart. This is the 500 millibar heights and temperature. So starting out this morning, we had a jet across the southwest into the Carolinas. And I found that jet because I can see the packing of those height lines, those black lines right there. Another segment of the jet off of Oregon. There's a jet max, and we run that into this evening. You're going to see that jet max move up towards Washington. So the weather going downhill along the Washington coast, but a wave approaching California right there, and that'll get into Northern California tonight. A couple waves coming in through the northeastern U.S. There's one, there's another, but some ridging coming back in behind across Ontario. Then going into Saturday, you can see that ridge building into Ontario and Quebec, improving the weather in that area, linking up with this other ridge down to the south, some troughing in the Central Plains, strong ridging in the Rockies, and here comes a strong trough heading for California, and that'll come onshore during the day on Sunday. Another trough moving in, and this next one will be digging into Southern California for Tuesday. So we're looking at weather going downhill in Southern California for Tuesday afternoon. So there's the jet max, there's the jet axis, and there's probably some cold air in the mid-levels right there, possibly fronts running about like that. And you can see the ridging out ahead of it. That's going to be associated with the warm air advection. So that's going to be another strong system to look forward to. And on the East Coast, we need to run this back. There's so much happening. You can see that trough right there amplifying on Monday, diving into the southeastern U.S. and producing some weather going downhill, some deterioration of weather by Tuesday night. So, yeah, I guess you can just check on your own local area and see what's going on, because there's so much going on. Strong low there in the plains for Wednesday and Thursday, and deepening of this long wave trough. So we're just not over for the West Coast for at least a week. Let's take a look at the precipitable water, because this has some surprises. Going into this evening, about half an inch to 1 inch of precipitable water heading into Northern California. That's an atmospheric river right there, and that works down the coast over the weekend. But a rapid return of moisture by Sunday night into Monday. There it is, 1 inch precipitable water flooding into San Francisco and the central coast, and possibly as high as 1.5 inches. And there's the biggest impacts that's going to be late on Monday, a low around San Francisco, and then the next shot coming in for about Friday or Saturday. And because there's a lot of weather happening elsewhere around the country, let's check out the east region. Starting out this morning, you can see how dry this system is in Texas. It struggles to get precipitable water up to 1 inch. That's going to be mostly in Arkansas. So we're going to have a warm front like that, cold front down to the southwest, and that'll migrate eastward into Tennessee by tomorrow evening. Now, these precipitable water amounts have come up quite a bit by tomorrow, widespread 1 inch amounts. So we're going to take a look at the convective outlook. Cold front south like that, and the whole thing will migrate eastward. You can see by the time it gets out to the Gulf Stream waters, some deepening. And another wave coming together off of Louisiana. And that heads out to sea. Another system coming together on the plains by next Thursday, and that could have bigger impacts along the East Coast. A major storm coming together by next weekend, the 14th. And you can see how well developed that is right there. 990 millibar low. The front's mostly offshore, but lots of onshore component, and the warm conveyor belt heading right into the northeastern U.S. So we're going to take a look at that going into next week. Two big systems on each coast. So how about that? The SPC Day 1 outlook for today looks like not much concern for the West Coast. Probably a fairly stable environment. Going into tomorrow, that system comes together, but still looking at a general risk in the Louisiana, Arklatex, and South Texas area. Day 3, pretty much the same. So thankfully, we're not looking for any major severe weather. Now, this is a chart that I really like. I think it's important to slice and dice the atmosphere as much as you can, especially in the lower atmosphere. This is 850 millibars. This is at about 5,000 feet. We're looking at the heights, which is kind of like pressure in black. We've got the temperature in red, the red lines right there. That's in degrees Celsius. And the blue and red shading, that's the gradient. So where you have red, that means you have warm air replacing cold air. And that happens when you have a gradient with winds replacing one air mass with the other. And where we have a combination of blue and red, that's usually a good indication that there's a frontal system. So there is some baroclinicity in here, indicating a cold front and a warm front, an 850 millibar front at least. But that's it right there this morning. And we can watch it progress during the day today. So there you go. You can see it moving up into Kansas. A little bit of a cold push in the panhandles of Texas. The warm front over northern Oklahoma, kind of like that right there. Possibly down south like that. And let's watch what happens overnight. It kind of falls apart, doesn't it? I mean, we can still pick out the fronts looking at the red lines. Yeah, that's going to be the warm front and cold front. But it looks like these enhanced advection areas have kind of diminished a little bit. And that indicates that there's not as much energy working inside the storm. And the pressures, they don't really drop all that much in the center either. So we're going to have this front that kind of slowly sinks to the southeast, maybe reinforced by any convection that gets going. We can use a similar process. Let me back that up, and we can look at the west coast. So a strong gradient. This looks like an area of cold air advection out here, and that's associated with that cold front, maybe something like that. So running that forward, lots of warm air advection building back in behind that system. So that's going to be the atmospheric river, probably another piece of it right there. And in California, finally, we see a front coming on shore Saturday night. So that's going to be a front right there at 850 millibars and up to the north in occlusion. And then we get another punch. You can see that one's even stronger for Monday. Some of the energy heads up into Washington and Vancouver Island. And on the tail end, we got this other frontal system right there that moves on shore. Quite a bit of deepening there. And that continues on into Tuesday. And it just keeps on coming, one after the other. Now, one other area where they're getting some weather is in Europe. We can look at those charts the same way. Cold front, probably a warm front like that, and the rest of it up here in occlusion. But let's take a look at the surface chart. There you go, very deep low west of Ireland. The GFS had 945 millibars on that. The Weather Service had 941 millibars analyzed this morning, and that was a 51 millibar pressure drop from the previous 24 hours. So quite a bit of intensification right there, but since that is in the occluding stage, that is going to gradually fill, and most of the stronger dynamics will relocate out to the east. So let's take a quick look at what happens with that strong front coming into the British Isles for this evening. The main occlusion hanging back to the west, and everything gradually moves to the east. Some filling of that low, some broadening of the circulation. That takes the wind gradient down a little bit. And then gradually all that maritime polar air floods into western Europe. And that's what we're looking at there for Monday and Tuesday. And another strong system out here, very well developed warm sector. That's very spectacular to look at. Strong warm push for Monday into Tuesday, and then the cold front moves right through England. So even they are getting a pretty active storm track from the ocean regions. And speaking of storm tracks, let's take a look at the IVT values from UCSD. Very helpful in looking at the timing of everything. and the intensity. So tonight's wave comes inland, 500 to 600 IVT values, which is kind of in the moderate range. Another wave coming in tomorrow night, pretty similar. And here comes the next stronger one for Monday night. Probably Sunday into Monday. And that brings some rather high values into the central California valleys around Sacramento, Stockton. You can see that that's up near 1,000, which is in the strong category. And there's already a flash flood watch. Great potential here for flooding. And that continues into Monday night. And here comes the next one. So, yeah, California, I guess you're finally getting some rain. I don't know if that's going to be enough to make up the deficit. Certainly, every little bit will help, and hopefully we don't get any catastrophic effects from this active weather pattern. Also, as a footnote, the American Meteorological Society will be having their annual meeting starting on Sunday in Denver. Let's take a look at the weather there real quick. Not much going on initially. There's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, so all I see here is some lee side troughing. I'm sure due to some of these recent snows, some good skiing conditions, and the attendees will probably be taking advantage of that. And the meeting concludes on Thursday. Little weak wave moving through the area, some mixed precip in the area, but fortunately no big weather impacts for that meeting. All right, and that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. A little bit of important news. I'm going to go ahead and move to a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday schedule for everybody. So an extra day for everybody, and the supporters will be moved probably to Tuesday or over the weekend. I'm not really sure which. So I'm going to stick to that as long as we maintain these numbers. I do have to kind of balance things out with my books. And by the way, about the books, if you can't support the channel via Patreon, please go to weathergraphics.com, and that's where I have my forecasting books. There's at least 6 or 7 of them, and that'll help augment some of the stuff that we're covering. And also, please comment and let me know where you're at, and any comments about the material here. And please subscribe as well. That'll definitely help us out. So I'll leave you with some footage just from a few days ago around San Antonio. Thanks to Greg for this footage. Always great stuff here. Take care, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Have a good one. Bye-bye.